Welcome everyone, my name is AJ Barsay. I'm an instructional technologist here at Western, and this presentation is dedicated to students. Consider this, your technologist survival guide to this new environment that we've found ourselves in, called online learning. Now, this guide is really going to be tailored towards equipping you as a student with tools that are available here at Western, but also tools that are either freely or free enoughly available to you that you can use for your audiovisual creation for your courses. Now, this could come in the waves of video that is going to be required in your classes. This could be coming from audio, maybe a podcast will be assigned to you. And of course, there's the occasional time that you'll have to design graphics using things like Photoshop and Illustrator. And I'll talk about both Adobe as well as alternatives that you can use even long past you graduating here at Western. So without any further ado, let's dive into this new land. So I really have 4 buckets for you that we're going to be pulling from. Collaboration, collab for short, because that way it makes my presentation look pretty. Video. This is going to be in the way of doing video for video production, kind of like what I'm doing right now. This is being used as Screencast-O-Matic, which isn't in this presentation, but I will have a link to a really good tutorial on how to use SCOM in the link in the module below. Audio. This is something near and dear to my heart as a podcaster. I love doing audio production, and there are really 2 major tools that A2S supports and are pretty reasonably either easy to get or freely available to you. And then lastly is design, and this one really hits at the heart of Adobe. There's kind of 2 camps. You're either with Adobe or you're without Adobe. And in these COVID-19 times or work and learn in place times that we're in, I have some updates from Adobe, but I also have alternatives that you can use both now, but also kind of to keep in your back pocket as you graduate. They're really good professional tools even for the workplace. So what tools are available? Well, let's get collaboration out of the way. You got Office 365 and you got Google Suite. So here at Western, we have 2 different camps, but really Office 365 is the official communications channel. That's why we have our Outlook and we have our Office Online like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, all freely available for every student, staff, and faculty. Now, out of this, in this new era that we're in right now, I really want to harp on Outlook, Teams, and Office Online, because these are going to be like the 3 things I could see a lot of students really hanging on to. Outlook, of course, because it's Outlook and it kind of keeps all of our main thread of communication coming through, the official communication channel of Western. But also Teams. Now, if you've never heard of Teams before, I have a slide later that I'm going to hit on this in a second, but Teams, think of it like Microsoft's ripoff of Slack, but a little bit more graphically intensive and also has some really nice features. The last one is obviously Office Online, and this is how you're going to be able to collaborate in Canvas or even amongst small groups. While we're having to work still in groups, yes, there will still be group work in classes, and we're going to have to do it at a distance. So being able to collaborate using things like Teams and Office Online to connect with your group members to get that collaborative assignment done is going to be a must. The other side of this is Google. So in Google, the 3 things that I can see most students really working in is YouTube, Google Drive, and Google Docs. Now, YouTube needs no introduction, but I just want to remind you, every student, staff, and faculty has a G Suite account. All you need to do is go to Google and sign in, and it'll ask you to do the G Suite login. And if you put in your username at www.edu, if you haven't done this before, it'll redirect you to our central authorization little thing that you always see that you have to re-put in your password twice. So once you get there, you now have a YouTube account dedicated to you while you're here at Western. Now, why is this important? Let's say you're a gamer and you don't want, say, your Let's Plays be the next thing that play after, say, a video assignment for an English class. So being able to have your course content in a dedicated YouTube that doesn't touch maybe your personal life, it might be beneficial to you. Also, if you've never wanted to get into YouTube and nor do you ever want to pursue YouTube, this is also an easy way for you to get your assignments done without having to have an extra account or another way for people to look you up and creep you out. So that's the YouTube angle here. Google Drive, if you need storage, and let's face it, in this collaborative work in place, learn in place era, you're going to need a lot more space. And I cannot stress enough how much Google Drive is really helpful. I have a colleague that's pushed over a terabyte of stuff up into our Google Drive, especially in trying to transfer videos. If you're trying to kind of swap things in between people that are really big files, Google Drive really has a lot of robustness to it. Now, obviously in Office 365, we also have OneDrive, but coming from me, I personally and usually professionally recommend using Google Drive, especially if you're trying to transfer large files. Media assets is what I'm talking about. Lastly is Google Docs. Google Docs can be incorporated into a Canvas class, but also it's a good way to share notes with one another if you're collaborating on a document. Really, it needs no introduction, but just let this serve as a reminder that you have both camps available to you. Office 365 as the predominant channel at Western, but also G Suite as the augmentation of collaboration, giving you extra, fuller, richer tools for you to get your assignments done. So the other side of this collaboration is live collaboration. And this is really going to come down to two camps, Zoom and Microsoft Teams. Now, Zoom, you've probably seen a lot in the news, especially with COVID-19. They're really helping us in education out by allowing pretty much all basic accounts having the fullest features that Zoom allows, with multiple people joining in a call recording, you name it. And what's great about Zoom, specifically for classes, I'm not going to talk about how to sign up for Zoom or anything. I'll have a link in the description that'll have my colleagues who have actually produced a Zoom workshop. But specifically for this presentation, I wanted to harp on podcasting. Now, especially before COVID, a lot of classes have been assigning podcasts or audio recordings that you would create a show for. Zoom was really kind of the way for most people to get remote people onto a show. Myself included as a podcaster outside of Western, this is and it has been our go-to tool for several years. And I have a link right in my presentation that'll take you to how to set up Zoom for a remote audio recording. It's a little bit different than what we usually show in like my colleagues' presentations for Zoom, because it's really tailored towards recording a video call. And this will help you set it up for an audio call and the next steps that come after that, which is going to require audio editing. More on that in a second. And being able to bring in music and other things. So that's the reason why I wanted to bring in Zoom in this regard. The other one is going to be Teams. Now, Microsoft Teams is integrated, so everybody at Western has it, and you can access it from the web, or you can use it on your mobile device or a laptop or whatever. It has its own dedicated app. And you'll also be able to get a hold of me. You can find me on Teams as just AJ Barce, and I'm more than happy Monday through Friday to be able to help you out. So that's the two camps that I really wanted to bring in for collaboration live. Zoom, think of that as a recording station, and Teams as your live connection and support station. Okay, so let's get into Adobe Creative Cloud. So at the time of this recording, Adobe has allowed for educational institutions to provide full Creative Cloud accounts until May 31st, 2020. So in light of COVID, because Adobe realizes that a lot of our campuses across the nation are shut down, should you be able to go to Adobe and sign into the Adobe ID, you'll be able to sign in using your Western credentials, no differently than you would with Office 365 or Google. But instead, it'll take you to this dashboard, and you'll be able to download the Creative Cloud client, which is kind of the thing that will be installed on your computer so that you can manage all of the apps, or you can download each app individually. Again, this is a temporary thing, and I have alternatives for future things should Adobe change this policy, or should Western not be able to maintain this policy. There will be other alternatives I'll be able to present in this presentation. So the other thing I want to point out is, this is something I've gotten a lot over the years, is Creative Cloud plans. Yes, they're very expensive. If you're buying them on your own, it can be upwards of $60 a month. There are two different ways that you can save money on Adobe if you need to. The first way is if you know you're going to be using it and you're going to be using it for at least a year, I would encourage you to look at the student and teachers edition of Creative Cloud. It's the same type of plan, but the big thing I want to point out is this is not a month-to-month plan. I've had several students come to me, or more importantly, come to me after they used their parents' credit card, and they'll see that the plan, no matter what, is going to be charged either upfront or you're going to be on the hook for 12 months of Creative Cloud. It's not the month-to-month plan where you can just turn it on and turn it off, or Netflix style. So should that be a problem for you and you just need, and I mean need, a app in the ecosystem known as Creative Cloud, take a look at just getting that single app for the 1 or 2 months that you need it for a course. If you know you're not going to use Adobe Premiere for more than just 3 months, you may want to just buy it for, or have the subscription plan for the single app you need for that single class for those 3 months, as opposed to chunking $60 a month for a whole bunch of apps you're not going to use. So if you're going to have to pay for Creative Cloud out of your own pocket, this is the 2 ways that I usually recommend to most students to get the app that you need or apps that you need, as well as save you some cashola. So on the other side of this camp is also Apple. At least at the time of this recording, Apple has not done much for education with regards to discounts, largely because they already have one that's longstanding beyond just the COVID-19 outbreak. If you're in the camp that you need Motion or Final Cut, I would encourage you to look at the Pro Apps Bundle for Education. It's applicable to both students and faculty. And by doing this, you have to prove that you're a student or faculty, and you can download all 5 of their pro apps for the price of 1. I mean, if anybody knows that or has used Final Cut, $200 or $199 is usually the price for just Final Cut alone. And this way you get all of them for the price of 1. And if you're going to be in that camp, and bear in mind, all of these products are only working on Mac OS, so PC users, you can ignore this part of this presentation. But if you are in the Mac camp and you do need that suite or bundle of apps, take a look at doing it this way because it'll save you some cashola. Okay, so now that I got all the official things out of the way, now that it's just you, me, and everybody else watching this, let's talk about alternatives. So what I like to kind of phrase this as, these are alternatives to the big creative apps that I've kind of talked about before, Adobe and Apple. But I'm framing it in a way that it is either these are apps that are affordable, open source, or free enough. And you'll understand the free enough in a second. So first up is video, and I like to get this one out of the way because this one is usually the really expensive elephant in the room. Much like I showed in the Adobe camp, there really is no video only package like they do for photographers. The only way to get Adobe Premiere Pro is really doing the whole Creative Cloud or the Premiere Pro single app subscription model. A lot of creatives and a lot of students, that doesn't really jive. So here are 3 other alternatives. So I've ranked these from Everest to Basecamp. Okay, so for starters, DaVinci Resolve. You've probably not heard of this, but you've probably heard of at least the parent company that makes the software, Blackmagic. Blackmagic came on the scene several years ago when 4K was a really big buzzword, and they created some really skookum cameras around 4K. And this is their software application that works with that, as well as their big control module station thing that just looks like something out of Captain Picard's Star Trek's bridge. What's great about this application is it is strong as an aux. If you are a pro and you need to have some really killer effects and you know what that means, you can do a lot of post-comp and you can do a lot of compositing in this thing. If you're just using it as a non-linear editor, meaning you're just taking a whole bunch of clips and you want to stick them together and make it look pretty, it also does that as well. And it does it on all 3 systems, Mac OS, Windows, and my Linux users out there, because I do hear you. And bear in mind that on all of these applications, when it comes to audiovisual, it's going to come down to the specifications of your hardware. So in the case of DaVinci Resolve, there is some additional oomph that is required. So when you run the installer, it will ask you and it'll run an extra piece of software to make sure that your hardware will support it. So just keep that in the back of your mind as well. The interface of this, if you are part of the Adobe camp, you're probably not going to like DaVinci, but if you're part of Apple's Final Cut camp and you like that style of interface, you're going to find yourself at home with DaVinci Resolve. And as a little pro tip, when you first load it up, it'll ask you what type of workflow you're used to, and it will remap the keys to that. So if you're used to using B for blade, etc., you can tell it that and it will remap it for you. So it'll get you up to speed as fast as possible, regardless of what camp that you come from for video editing. The second one is HitFilm Express. It's a company based out of the United Kingdom, and I believe they're now rebranded called FX Home. Now, HitFilm Express is really geared towards the backyard cinema enthusiast, somebody who wants to do their own short films or cinema. And honestly, it has a lot of tools with that regard. But in the case of academics, this is a great Adobe Premiere ripoff for interfaces. If you're used to Adobe Premiere and that module system, this is going to feel right at home for you. Now, when you get into HitFilm Express, you do have to sign up for a free account, which is no problem. And the way that they make their money is they do have a pro one. I've done productions out of Express and have really not needed the extended features that are required in Pro. And on top of that, if you do need some of those features, you can actually buy them a la carte, the whole freemium model type of thing. It's available for Mac and Windows, and I give it my free enough sticker on it because you can get a lot done with it. Moving on, there is the Basecamp. And unfortunately, it is just for Mac users. It is iMovie. Now, iMovie is good enough, especially if you're doing something simple. If you're taking a couple of clips, maybe a couple of photos, and you stick them all together, that's what iMovie's really good at. Anything more complex, I would not even waste my time with. There's two very major limiting factors that I have to address with iMovie, and that is you can only have up to 2 video tracks. So if you have a main track and B-roll, and you want to jump to another one, you have to put it in the timeline, either in your B-roll or your main track. And that's really a deal breaker if you're doing a lot of compositing. The other thing is, if you're doing what I'm doing right now, doing green screening, there's a huge limitation with regards to the fact that you cannot green screen or key, as well as do a picture-in-picture, a la having it small in the right-hand corner. If you're going to be doing that level of video production, I would encourage you to use something more like Screencast-O-Matic, and it gets the job done a lot easier, in my opinion, than, say, iMovie. And on top of that, Screencast-O-Matic is both cross-platform. Let's segue into audio now. Like I said before, I have a link down below that will take you to the audio production, either workshop for the STC or an audio production course that I've created around Zoom, especially for doing podcasting in the remote environment. So the first one is Audacity. It's free, it's open source, and probably is the most outdated looking interface you're going to see in a piece of software in a long time. But it is a go-to. I mean, if you listen to podcasts at all, you'll hear that most podcasters use Audacity or at least used it to get started. And honestly, it has a lot of professional tools. The thing that gets a lot of students is where you get started. Once you get that first initial file started and you drag in your clips, trying to find the tools or understand the interface on the fly to be able to do something simple as just, roll back a clip can be daunting. So you'll see here on my slide, I have my little cheat sheet, or as I like to call it, how to get yourself to happy hour sooner. There's 6 icons up on the top. These 6 icons, plus if you know Control I to split a clip, is 95% of the battle if you're doing basic audio editing. And like I said, I'll have a video later regards to specifically doing audio production in Audacity, but I just want to point out, if you can see those 6 tools and at least play with them with an audio file, you're going to be better off than just floundering around and randomly pushing buttons. The second one is only, again, for the Mac environment, and that is GarageBand. Now, GarageBand is great for podcasting, but also if you're doing music. They have these things called loops, which allows you to make your own original music. And I get this question a lot. You're creating a podcast for class. How do I get royalty-free music? Well, there are things like the Free Music Archive, and you can use that stuff with attribution, of course. But I always encourage students to take it one step further and make your own. And loops are a great way to experiment and also express yourself. A pro tip in GarageBand. When you set up a track, this is the corner of the track module in GarageBand, you'll notice that there's a new icon that I've exposed, and I have a bone to pick with Apple. They always hide this. There's this little line with 2 dots icon that's hidden. It's called automation. The way to activate it is you press the A key on your keyboard. Once you have it, it'll stay there. But this is a really important tool. This is your ducking tool. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to slip volumes of your different tracks. So for instance, if I wanted to duck my volume of my music underneath my beginning narrative into my podcast, I'd be able to do that by activating the automation tool. Other apps like Audacity call it the enveloping tool, which is a common vernacular. But again, you won't see it unless you activate it. So press that A key. So lastly is design, and this gets back to where I first started, and that is the Adobe camp. Now, Adobe with Creative Cloud really has polarized the creative community. When they announced Creative Cloud several years ago, there was a lot of creatives that were desperate to find alternatives. And at the time, the landscape was pretty bleak. Yes, there are some open source things like GIMP and Scribus, but the interface and also specifically the file support, getting into PSDs or IDML, it was pretty rough around the edges. So Serif, also a UK-based company, relaunched their Affinity line, and they started with Affinity Photo, and this is really a Photoshop throwback. If you're used to good old Photoshop like Photoshop 9, around that era, it's everything that you know and love from back then, but brought forward with contemporary coding. It's fast. It is able to open up PSDs. So if you have Photoshop files, you'll be able to open them up and see all the layers. They're not rastered down. And when they had that app kind of on lockdown, then they designed Affinity Designer. And this is the Illustrator throwback. And really it throws you back to about Illustrator 11, if you remember that era, in all the right ways. And if you are into illustrations and coloring, the tag team between Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer is really impressive because what they designed is a unified or universal file format. You can start with an Affinity Designer file. You could draw everything as you like, but let's say you want to color it. You can open up that exact same file in Affinity Photo and start coloring right over the top, and it will know your vector illustrations. No more having to rasterize down, recolor, bring it back in. You're able to use this one file to rule them all in both apps. Then, just recently last year, they created Affinity Publisher. And Affinity Publisher goes at the heart of InDesign. Now, when it first launched, I was very skeptical of it, largely because there was no way to do anything from previous files from InDesign. Up until about 2 or 3 months ago, they now have support for IDML, or InDesign Markup Language. So if you have pre-existing layouts, you can open up the IDML file and it will bring in pretty much 90% of what's there. There's a few things you do have to relink, but if you're used to that moving from computer to computer anyway, you're not going to be lost in that. This trinity of design apps are really, really, really cool. And I can't stress that enough because they're not on a subscription model as well. They usually run about $50 a pop, so you're about $150 worth of software. During this COVID-19 outbreak, they're slashing everything in half. So you can actually get it for half that right now. But if you don't want a subscription-based apps for your creative work, and you're on either a Mac or a PC, it's quite compelling. They also have free trials, so you can check it out to make sure it's going to work with your workflow before you have to throw down some cashola. But do take a look at this, especially if you don't want to continuously pay for Creative Cloud. Last but not least is Canva. And I know Canva is cute and quaint, but for those of you that are on perhaps Chromebooks, or really you just need to design something really fast, maybe you need to design a cover jacket of a book, Canva is really a good place to start. I mean, it is what it is. It's free, it's browser-based, you just have to sign up with a free account. And the way they make their money is that there's extra graphics that are built in to their ecosystem, and when you export, they're going to ask you to pay for each individual item. However, if you use your own assets like I do, you don't have to pay anything. So really, if you're trying to do simple desktop publishing, something like in between, think of this like a lightweight version of Microsoft Publisher, which, by the way, isn't available for Mac users. So if you're looking for something to do basic graphic design, And this is a great way to kind of dip your toe into creative design and kind of understand how things can go together. So most importantly, I just want to say, on behalf of the STC, keep calm and learn online. I know this is going to be some crazy days ahead, and the STC is here to help. So you can reach out to us during our normal operational hours. We'll have that on our website, stc.wwu.edu, and you can plan on even connecting with me, especially during the week. And if there's anything I can do to help you in your classes, please don't hesitate to reach out. So this is my contact information, and it's also in my presentation. Thank you for tuning in today, and we hope to see you either online and hopefully face-to-face fairly soon at the Student Technology Center.